thanks, first of all, for having me. Thanks, Sylvia, for putting your background up of our initiatives. Those are a lot of our initiatives that I'll kind of go over. And I'll try to breeze through this real quickly and just give you a kind of overview. I'll make sure I keep the chat up if you do have questions, and I'll definitely answer some at the end of the presentation. I'm going to put my LinkedIn and our website in the chat, so feel free to friend me on LinkedIn, another social media that you probably don't use until you're in between jobs, but LinkedIn is a pretty resourceful and helpful growth tool, a lot of organic growth. So what is esports? Well, esports, spelled with a capital E in kind of sentences like this, or capital E at the beginning of a sentence or in a title, but usually a lowercase e. There's a big common misconception of putting a dash or an S, kind of like that. Back in the 90s when we used AOL, we called it E-mail. We don't call it E-mail anymore. It's esports. It's organized video game competition. There's a difference between playing video games and esports. It's basically competitive with rules and prizes. It's a big industry. Technically, it's about a $25 billion industry. Video games is a $160 billion industry. There's a ton of jobs, and I'll go over kind of how that is. But if you've seen anything on ESPN and you're probably wondering, why are these Zoomers and millennials out of their basement, not drinking soda and eating chips? What are they doing in an arena where Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield should be boxing? What is the deal? Why are we watching 10 nerds play computers on a big screen? Well, it's a very lucrative industry, and there's a lot of brand and a lot of money behind it, and a lot of big money and a lot of crazy money as well. We'll give you some stats about why it's grown and what it has become and what it will become, because there is no ceiling on it. I definitely am a sports person for the past 20 years, but esports in this industry and what we do in nonprofit space has been a lot of fun. But really, I focus on what esports is and gaming in schools. A lot of us probably played sports or band or drama or debate or any other things in high school, middle school, and it was an activity for you. Well, esports in schools means meeting students where they are, because a lot of kids play video games, and if you bring them into a safe environment outside of that basement, away from those snacks, and into a safe environment with educators and teachers and people who care about them, they find belonging, they find purpose, they find friendship, and there's a lot of learning involved there. This is our mission. We just strive to create an inclusive and safe and aspirational network of gaming communities for all, building a network, providing scholarship opportunities I'll talk about for the STEM and this esports world, safe environment, and definitely right now what we're doing is gaming literacy. We're established to provide financial assistance to schools to reach their potential, all about literacy, healthy lifestyles, mental health, community, and STEM, education, support, advocacy, and awareness is big to us. Big things for us. Digital citizenship is a huge deal. If you haven't heard about digital citizenship, it goes along with the digital divide that's happening right now that we talked about, inclusion for schools and students that don't have access. And I give these numbers out to you. Here in the States, we have about 350 million people or so, and 50 million people in the United States do not have access to the internet at home. So that also means when COVID happened, where people usually get the internet if they don't have it is maybe Wi-Fi or at the library or some civic area. We're not just focused on gaming, we're also focused on the internet access. Really, students, there's about 9 million students age 12 to 17 that don't have access to the internet at home either. So when COVID hit, they're not in school in those months in March, April, May. Like my kids, I have 3 boys, and they're all upstairs right now. My wife is the principal for our distance learning, and I'm the PE teacher when it's time to go ride bikes, or the IT director when the Wi-Fi goes down. And they're all on their iPads right now from school learning, but not every kid has access to an iPad or a computer to be able to do distance learning at this time. So those 9 million students that don't have access, well, there's still going to be probably 9 million at the end of COVID, whenever that is. But yeah, suicide prevention, internet safety, diversity, inclusion is really important to us, but belonging is big. Focusing on addictions, which gaming is an addiction just as much as alcohol or anything else. Is an addiction for people. We want to help be proactive in all these spaces to help students understand all these issues, rather than if you have any kids or grandkids that love getting your credit card and buying the new Fortnite skin, because if they don't, they're going to get bullied because all the other kids have it, or the new dance, or whatever it may be. These are big goals for us. Esports literacy, we do a lot of things around equipment, just like we talked about, grants, raising awareness. Done about $350,000 in college scholarships over the past few years. We work with Title I schools and free reduced lunch schools, and it's important for us to give gaming equipment or any STEM equipment because we're STEM accredited. We were one of the first nonprofits in this gaming space to be STEM accredited. And, that STEM is a movement. STEM is something developed in the 2000s, early 2000s, to really be a global leader to help our students be more globally ready to get jobs around the world. So it's a really great organization that we're a part of because they focus on STEM education. Gaming in schools, it brings kids together that struggle with belonging. Society tells us we should stop playing video games and go outside, right? Over in Wichita, we had a teacher and a principal create an actual full textbook that's STEM accredited called Gaming Concepts. And because of esport clubs in schools, just like a football club or an after-school program or a robotics club, it's shown a GPA increase of 1.7, and attendance has gone up by 10%. If you really think about any activity a kid gets involved in, they're going to have the ability to maybe find community. I'm going to touch on that more here in a minute, but this is really what the curriculum looks like. It's not a how to play video games. It's wrist exercises, food pyramid, gamer health, survey, strategy, team building, job shadowing, all these important things that would help students. It's free curriculum. We put it out because it's free and we want people to use it. There's a lot of high schools in North America. There's about 3,000 to 4,000 high schools in North America that have esport clubs as an after-school program, as a class tied into their computer science, and they're getting credit for college because of things like this. Esport clubs provide belonging. 82% of the kids that are in these esport clubs and use this curriculum, we say, hey, what other activities do you do? And they say none. And if you think about this, let's survey football players, survey soccer players, basketball players, kids in band. Maybe they don't have any other activities they do, so that's typical, but they found something. The idea here is any activity a kid gets involved in is going to give them belonging. But 97% of teens play video games. Okay, that's almost all. Kids play video games. And we tend to look at kids playing video games in their teenage years. And for me, I'm 38, and people even my age as sometimes a waste of time. Well, when my 5-year-old, he uses his Leap Pad to learn as a video game to be educated is good. When some of our elderly use video games to get better at memory and help their cognitive awareness, it's good. But it can be seen as a waste of time. And I'll kind of show you some research on that. Talked about the GPA increase at schools. This is high schools and middle schools, even colleges. And I'll talk a little more about colleges here in a minute, because there are $20 million in scholarships available every year to play video games as a Division I sport, a junior college sport, an activity at a school, under an athletic department, under engineering department. There are actual teams. There are over 2,000 colleges in the United States. There's 5,000 total in the United States. There's over 2,000 colleges, universities, higher ed that have esport clubs. 200 of those are varsity programs. So that means they are providing scholarships, tuition discounts, partial scholarships for students to come and compete and play against other colleges, just like any school would do with any other sport. Now, those students are also doing any degree they choose, depending on what college they go to, but they're getting recruited all across the country. That's the top down. I will say that there's about $5 million of those dollars that go unused every year. And I'll say it again, there's $5 million of unused scholarships going unused every year in esports, just like rowing maybe for women. And there's another sport, I believe in NCAA, that there's a lot of unused dollars because there's not enough students in the pipeline to come out of high school. Same thing here. There's not enough students in the pipeline to use those dollars. Going to talk about violence in video games. Violence in video games is a big deal. We have this, what a fitting day to talk about this, but both of our presidential candidates over the past 10 years have said video games cause school shootings or video games have done things in violence. Well, there's a lot of research around it. There's a lot of research that there's been no link between violence in video games and teenage violence. It's been used as a talking point, but that's okay. Kids are going to still keep playing them. We see a decrease in violent crimes, and we still have a lot more people playing video games. What about screen time? Well, Oxford study, there's no relationship between aggressive behavior and screen time. Now, this isn't saying you shouldn't. I'm in video games, and I have to wean myself off of screen time. I have to help my own kids. I got a preacher point, I got a preacher point. I got three fingers pointing back at me. I understand this. I've got to be able to have screen time restrictions for my own kids. But it's important for you to also know rankings of games, just like you wouldn't let your kid watch an R-rated movie if he's 10. Same thing in video games. There's ratings on violence in video games where we need to take an active role as parents to make sure our kids aren't playing shoot 'em up games when they shouldn't really be playing shoot 'em up games at that age. They're gonna make Lego guns out of nowhere when they've never, like my kids created Lego guns out of nowhere, and I've never shown them a gun, but it's part of our society that kids are going to create stuff. The balance of video games is there, and it's talked about. Increased gray matter volume. I talked about it. Kids, seniors, adults. It's helping with neurological and cognitive functions. In memory, helping out with memory. I mean, if you're going to play a game that requires you to flip cards and play memory with cards, memory and muscle movements can be really helpful for helping them later in years. Talked about the industry being a $24 billion industry. This is the kind of big thing is the game publishers, the people who make the games. Is esport a sport? That's a big question we all have. Well, depends. Do you get sweaty? Do you have physical activity? Do you know the Olympic sport of what's the downrange shooting, where you're actually just standing there and sitting there and shooting and just moving one finger? I don't know. Is that a sport? A lot of questions to think about, right? This is a big one. You can take out players and games here and put an NBA, and all these jobs are the same kind of thing in NBA. Similar jobs like shoutcasters is what you call commentators in video games, video game competitions, journalists, art, media, business developer, corporate sponsorships. These are all jobs you could just take sports and add an E and it's there, because there are so many careers. That curriculum that we have for free for any of these schools to use is designed to be college and career readiness for students, but the lens of esports and gaming in school in a safe environment. Got a lot of research. You can look at our website. We also have some free courses. I am happy to share this link, and I'm going to answer some questions here in a second, but there's a link. If you want to watch a What is Esports course, it's 15-20 minutes. Our volunteer who created this, he was a former professional player in esports. That's right, professional player. He coached at the collegiate level, at NAIA level, and worked with many K-12 students. And he's also very famous on TikTok about video games. Feel free to take this What is Esports course. It's just video content. You're just literally watching a few videos and learning a little bit more about what I spoke about, and it's free. All these blue ones are free on there on that course. I definitely encourage, if there's any questions out there, to put them in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into that because I know we're short time, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to read these out real quick, and then if you guys have any other questions, examples of universities that are now offering esport programs, a really good source if you have students or kids that are looking for that. There's a website called LF Group, and it actually lists the 200 some odd schools. I'm putting that in the chat. If you know any kids or students looking for scholarships of any of those 5 million that get wasted, there are schools you can just search in your area. All ranges, NCAA Division I down to JUCO. Data and difference in approach to video games between young boys and girls. Well, toxicity in video games is horrible, but so is me going to play pickup basketball with my buddies at the local gym. Toxicity is there because we're always talking smack to each other about 3-pointers or air balls. It's there. Until toxicity goes away in society, we're going to have it in just about every facet. And just like we do on Facebook, it's a pretty political day. We have a lot of toxicity between males and females in video game as well, where girls sometimes don't turn on their voice chat to talk because they don't want to get harassed. And it's a bad, bad thing. And we talk a lot about that with our foundation. We want to make sure little boys are learning they can't talk trash. But the video games as well, not all girls play Hello Kitty Island Adventure. They sometimes play Fortnite. They a lot of times play Fortnite or Call of Duty. There's no restriction. That's the fun thing about esports in schools, is it's not a boys team or a girls team or a team for special needs or disabled students. It is a team with boys and girls and a person with one arm or in a wheelchair, black, white. That's bringing kids together and helping defeat that kind of issues we struggle with here in the States. And I'll say that's a big focus for our foundation, is working with those disenfranchised students in schools in lower income areas, especially when we have things like years and years of systemic inequality, not giving the same equal access to the kids in the suburbs that get in the suburbs. I grew up inner city in Oklahoma City, didn't have the same access to my friends did from church in the suburbs. So there's a thing called digital redlining, just as like there is in redlining with banks and mortgages. And digital redlining is that lack of access for internet devices. What jobs are available? I hope I covered some of that stuff. There's a lot. I'll say kind of on those stats, the African-American community is underrepresented in that, in the sense that 83% of teenage boys, African-American boys, play video games, but only 13% of minorities create video games. So there's a definite need for diversity there. Question: game developers like social media platforms to insert things to the program encouraging addiction, or better said, staying online as long as possible. How do you balance the fact that the addiction training you do with your program? Great question. There is a really good organization called Game Quitters. I'm going to put that in the chat. That is a partnership we work with on addiction. The big thing is you call it the grind. Okay. We all have the grind where we're trying to get that promotion. We're trying to do better at activity. We want to do better at solitaire. It doesn't even matter what we're doing. We're grinding, right? In our jobs, our lives, our careers, our activities. Well, we unfortunately don't get upset when a basketball player shoots 1,000 free throws for 5 hours, but we do have an issue with students grinding or kids grinding on 10 hours of video game play, and it's not healthy because it's not as seen as the same physical activity. Well, that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is don't do that. Everything should be in moderation. Everything should be in moderation. I've got a lot of candy upstairs for my kids going door to door and picking up. It was actually pretty nice being able to go door to door, wear mask, and actually get the bowl of candy away from the door. And, that interaction wasn't there. And, for me, it was nice because maybe I could grab a piece for myself, and I didn't have to wear a costume and ask for something in my bag. It was great. So there's a lot of candy upstairs, right? I think for all of us, but moderation is important. And I think the issue we struggle with those companies is they're also trying to sell stuff. Everybody's trying to sell something. Facebook is sold to us, but it's also an addiction. There's a lot of addictions out there. I definitely encourage groups like Game Quitters. They have a program for addiction. I think addiction is a real thing. I say society's got to change. We've been perpetuating so many bad things about video games for years, and perpetuating our behind the keyboard lifestyle on social media that's grown over the past 15 years. Younger children, yes, middle school students, high school students. So big links here. The high school esports league, I'll put that link in the chat as well, is for high school. There's also a middle school esports league where they play games like Minecraft and Dance Dance Revolution. If you know what Dance Dance Revolution is, it's a lot of fun, and it gets sweaty. What do you know? There's also a big game that's out there called Rocket League. Rocket League is basically playing soccer on a court with cars. It's a lot of fun. I'm terrible at it, but these kids are great. I played soccer in college. Playing soccer in a remote control car compared to the remote control cars I drove when my dad was at Radio Shack, totally different. But Minecraft is a great tool for young students. I just got into Minecraft with my kids last month, doing a challenge to build different things as part of this national challenge, and I'm absolutely loving it because I'm a nerd, and I get to do games with my kids that aren't Fortnite.